November 17th, 1943, 21:47 hours. Bougainville Island, Solomon Islands. The jungle breathed around Elijah Crow, 80 yards forward of the marine perimeter, alone in darkness that pressed against his skin like wet wool, the air thick with rot and salt and the copper smell of recent rain. He crouched motionless. Had been motionless for 43 minutes. A lifetime of hunting had taught him patience. The depression had taught him stillness. War was teaching him something else entirely. In his hands, a weapon the United States Marine Corps did not issue, did not authorize, did not understand. A 68-pound longbow, 6 feet of Missouri hickory and yew shaped by hands that knew hunger better than comfort. 26 hunting arrows with filed steel broadheads, a K-bar knife on his belt, canteen half full, no rifle, no pistol, no grenade, just the bow, just the darkness, just Elijah Crow and whatever came through that tree line. The numbers were already impossible, would become legendary. 116 Japanese soldiers, 5 days, 0 gunshots, 1 bow. Marine Corps regulations prohibited non-standard weapons in combat zones. Section 12, paragraph 4, subsection C. Crow had violated it the moment he stepped into this position. Command would either court-martial him for disobedience or pin a medal on his chest for results. Tonight would decide which. 70 yards to his front movement, 4 shapes separating from the greater darkness. Japanese infantry, 6th Division, veterans of China hardened by years of brutal warfare. Men who knew every sound an American rifle made, every tactical pattern, every weakness. They had no idea what hunted them now. Crow's fingers tested the bowstring, the familiar tension. Muscle memory built over 7 years of survival shooting, of feeding siblings when the choice was hunt successfully or watch them go hungry. This bow had put rabbit on the table when there was nothing else. Had dropped deer at 90 yards in Missouri twilight. Now it would drop men. He drew slowly, controlled, creating absolutely no sound. The Japanese were 45 yards out, moving with the confidence of soldiers who had survived Guadalcanal, who understood this jungle, who feared American firepower but had learned to counter it. The lead soldier stopped, lit a cigarette, the tiny flame a beacon in the darkness. Crow released. The arrow covered 45 yards in under a second, struck the soldier's throat, punched clean through. The man made no sound beyond a wet gurgle, collapsed like his legs had been cut from beneath him. The cigarette fell, smoldered in the wet earth, dead before his brain processed what had killed him. 3 remaining soldiers dropped to combat crouches, scanning the jungle, rifles ready, listening for the report of a rifle, the distinctive crack that would tell them where to return fire. They heard nothing. Crow was already drawing again. This was November 17th, 1943. The night Elijah Crow proved that the old ways could still win modern wars. That sometimes the most dangerous warrior isn't the one with advanced technology, but the one who has mastered a craft so completely that it transcends time itself. By the time Japanese commanders understood what they faced, 116 of their soldiers would be dead, killed by a weapon their samurai ancestors would have recognized. Delivered by a sharecropper's son from Missouri who had learned to shoot because the alternative was starvation. This is that story. Childhood, hunger's teacher, Hickory Bend, Stone County, Missouri, 1927. The kind of place maps forgot. Population 217 when everyone was home, which they rarely were. Men worked the mines or the timber. Women worked the fields or the kitchens of families wealthy enough to afford help. Children worked whatever needed working. Elijah Crow was born here November 13th, 1919. 4th generation on land his family never quite owned. Sharecroppers. 45% of every harvest went to the landowner. What remained fed 4 children, sometimes. The house had 3 rooms, gaps in the floorboards wide enough to see chickens underneath. In winter, wind came through those gaps like the house wasn't even there. Elijah shared a bed with 2 brothers, 1 blanket between them. You learned to sleep close, to share heat, to wake when the cold became dangerous. His father worked land that would never be his, planted corn and tobacco and hope, harvested 2 of those. The hope died sometime around Elijah's 8th birthday, about the same time his mother died from typhoid. 3 weeks later, the baby sister who'd survived birth didn't survive August. 2 graves on a hillside, 1 wooden cross between them. After that, his father found answers in bottles. Elijah found them in the woods. 1929, the year the world broke. The year Wall Street crashed and took Stone County, Missouri down with it. Not that anyone in Hickory Bend owned stocks, but the mine closed, timber operations shut down, the price of corn dropped so low it cost more to harvest than it was worth. The Crows lost their farm in 1931, became tenant farmers, lower than sharecroppers, worked land for a place to sleep and whatever scraps the landowner didn't want. Elijah was 12 years old, the oldest of three siblings still breathing. His father's hands shook too much to work. Someone had to feed the family. He learned from old man Jeremiah Hatch. Hatch lived alone in a cabin 2 miles into the woods, 93 years old, had fought for the Union at Shiloh, lost his left arm below the elbow to a Confederate minie-ball, learned to shoot a bow because rifles required 2 hands. He taught Elijah for the same reason teachers always teach, because someone had to carry the knowledge forward. Bullets cost money you don't have, Hatch said that first afternoon his remaining hand gnarled as tree roots. Bow and arrows cost time. You got plenty of time and no money. Seems like simple mathematics to me. The bow was crude. Hickory wood, sinew string, drew maybe 30 pounds. Arrows were straightened branches with turkey feather fletching and carved points. You're gonna miss a lot at first, Hatch said. That's fine. Miss with bullets, you waste pennies you can't spare. Miss boss with arrows, you waste nothing but pride. And pride don't feed children. Elijah missed his first 17 shots. The rabbit he'd been aiming at probably died of old age years later. But the 18th arrow flew true. He carried that rabbit home like it was gold. Because that night his siblings ate. And eating mattered more than anything else in the world. The mathematics became clear. 1 rabbit fed the family for a day, 1 deer fed them for 2 weeks. Missing meant going hungry. Hitting meant survival. It wasn't sport. It was never sport. It was the difference between eating and starving. 7 years, 1931 to 1938. Elijah hunted. Not for recreation, not for pride, for food, for survival, for the 3 faces watching him come home each evening, wondering if there would be dinner. The numbers told the story. 340 rabbits, 290 squirrels, 52 deer, 180 turkeys. Average distance, rabbits at 40 yards, deer at 90, turkeys at 60. First-year miss rate, 65%. Wasted more arrows than he landed. Went to bed hungry more often than not. By 1938, his miss rate had dropped to 6%. He didn't improve because he wanted to be good. He improved because missing had consequences. Because every wasted shot meant his 10-year-old brother went to bed with an empty stomach. Because pride was a luxury and survival was necessity. The bow became an extension of his body. Draw, hold, release, retrieve, reset, again and again and again, 10,000 shots, 20,000, until his hands knew the motion better than breathing. He modified everything, carved arrows from hickory when he could find it, straightened shafts over fire, made broadheads from filed nails, turkey feather fletching gathered from the woods. Every arrow built by hand because buying them was impossible. By age 13, he drew a 40-pound bow. By 16, 55 pounds. By 19, 68 pounds. Each increase in draw weight meant more power, more penetration, longer effective range. He developed techniques that made veteran hunters shake their heads. Weight shooting, or holding a bow at full draw for 45 seconds. 60. Waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect angle. Most archers couldn't hold 30 seconds. Elijah could hold a minute and a half, because patience meant food. Rushing meant hunger. Hickory Bend had 1 schoolhouse, 1 room, 1 teacher for 30 students aged 6 to 16. Elijah attended 3 months a year when harvest didn't require his hands. He learned to read well enough, write adequately, cipher numbers sufficient for weighing tobacco. The woods taught him everything else. How to move without sound, how to read wind by watching leaves, how to track deer by broken twigs and disturbed earth, how to wait, how to be patient, how to be still so completely that birds landed 3 feet away. These weren't sports skills. These were survival skills. The difference mattered. By 1938, Elijah Crow was 19 years old, 5'11", 148 pounds, lean as a wolf, quiet as falling snow. Could put an arrow through a rabbit's eye at 40 yards, could drop a running deer at 90. His siblings had grown, were old enough to work, old enough to feed themselves. His father had mostly stopped drinking. Mostly. Elijah took a job at the zinc mine 18 miles from Hickory Bend. 35 cents an hour, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, $21 a week. More money than he'd ever seen. The bow went into the barn, hunting season only now, for pleasure instead of necessity. He thought he was done with it. December 7th, 1941, proved him wrong. Enlistment. The bow returns to war. The radio in the mine supervisor's office crackled with impossible news. Pearl Harbor. Japanese attack. Thousands dead. Pacific Fleet burning. Elijah Crow was 22 years old. Had spent 7 years shooting to survive. 3 years underground digging zinc from Missouri earth. On December 12th, he walked 18 miles to the Marine Corps recruiting station in Springfield. The recruiter was a staff sergeant with 3 rows of ribbons and a handshake like a vice. "You ever shoot a rifle, son?" "No, sir. Shot a bow since I was 12. The recruiter paused, looked Elijah up and down, lean, quiet, hands calloused from work. "Well, we'll teach you rifles. That's what we do." Boot camp, Marine Corps recruit, Depot, San Diego. 12 weeks that rebuilt men from the ground up. Elijah qualified expert rifleman, M1 Garand, 216 points out of a possible 250. The rifle felt foreign in his hands, loud, violent, effective, but crude. His groupings at 200 yards averaged 4 inches, better than 90% of recruits, but his bow groupings had been tighter. At longer range, he kept that observation to himself. Infantry training, Camp Pendleton, amphibious assault doctrine, squad tactics, fire and movement. Everything designed around modern warfare. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, artillery. No one mentioned bows. Why would they? Hey, 1943. The 3rd Marine Division formed. Elijah assigned to 2nd Battalion 3rd Marines. Rifle platoon, private first class, one of 40 men under Lieutenant Fletcher Haynes. Haynes was 24, college educated, officer candidate school, everything by the book. Believed in doctrine, in regulations, in the Marine Corps way of doing things. They would clash. Eventually. June 1943. The division shipped to New Zealand for jungle warfare training, final preparation before deployment to the Solomon Islands, to islands whose names most Americans couldn't pronounce. Guadalcanal, Bougainville, Tarawa, places where men would die in numbers that defied comprehension. Elijah wrote home. One letter, asked his brother to send the hunting bow, the 68-pound longbow, the one that had fed them for 7 years. "Why you want that?" his bunkmate asked. "We got rifles." "Something to practice with," Elijah said, which was true, just not the whole truth. The bow arrived 3 weeks later, wrapped in canvas, 26 arrows packed carefully, filed broadheads sharp enough to shave with. The Marines called him Longbow Crow, mocking, good-natured. They didn't understand, saw it as a hobby, a curiosity, something to pass time between training exercises. Elijah set up targets, carved blocks of wood, coconuts, anything he could practice on. Shot alone, early mornings before formation, evenings after chow, weekends when others drank beer and played cards. 9 arrows, 18 seconds, 14-inch circle at 65 yards. He did this over and over, not for show, for muscle memory, because the bow had kept him alive once, might need to again. Gunnery Sergeant Amos Pritchard watched from a distance. Pritchard was 38, had survived Guadalcanal, had seen Japanese infiltration tactics firsthand. Small groups, night attacks, silent movement through jungle, cutting throats, creating chaos, disappearing before dawn. American countermeasures had limitations. Sentries with rifles, machine gun positions, flares. Every solution created new problems. Rifle fire revealed positions. Muzzle flashed like a beacon saying, "Here I am, kill me." Machine guns wasted ammunition shooting at shadows. Flares illuminated defenders as much as attackers. Pritchard had lost good men. Marines who did everything right, followed doctrine, maintained alertness, died anyway because Japanese tactics exploited American firepower's weaknesses. He watched Elijah put arrow after arrow into targets. Silent. No flash, no report. Just the whisper of stringing and shaft. One afternoon, Pritchard approached. "You any good with that thing, Crow?" "Good enough, Gunny." "Good enough for what?" Elijah considered. "Good enough to put meat on the table for 7 years. Good enough that my siblings didn't starve during the Depression." Pritchard nodded slowly. "You ever shoot at night?" "Often as not. Deer move at dawn and dusk. Hunted both." "You ever miss? Yeah, first year most of the time. Last 6 years, hardly ever." Pritchard pointed at a coconut 60 yards distant. "Hit that." Elijah drew, released. The arrow punched through the coconut with a sound like someone stepping on a branch. Again. 5 more arrows. 5 more hits. Pritchard picked up an arrow, examined the broadhead, filed steel, wicked sharp, designed to penetrate and kill. Guadalcanal, Pritchard said quietly. The Japs infiltrated every night. Small groups, 3 to 5 men, moved silent, cut throats, killed sentries. By the time we heard shooting, they'd already done damage. Our boys shoot back, muzzle flash gives away position. Jap mortars bracketed the flash. Killed the Marine who was trying to defend the perimeter. He handed the arrow back. Your bow makes no sound, creates no flash. Japs wouldn't know where it came from. No, sir. You willing to try it in combat? Elijah looked at the bow. 7 years of survival, of feeding family, of doing what was necessary. I'm willing. Lieutenant Haynes said no. Private Crow, this is the United States Marine Corps, not Sherwood Forest. We fight with rifles. M1 Garands, Browning automatic rifles, 30 caliber machine guns, not medieval weapons. Sir, Pritchard began. Gunny, I respect your experience, but regulations are clear. Standard weapons only. Sir, we lost 9 men in 4 nights on Guadalcanal to infiltrators. Sentries shot back, gave away positions, got killed by mortar fire. We need silent countermeasures. Then we'll develop doctrine for silent countermeasures, not, Haynes gestured at the bow, resort to primitive weapons. The argument ended there. For 2 weeks, November 1st, 1943, the 3rd Marine Division landed on Bougainville. 35,000 Japanese troops held the island. The fighting was immediate, brutal, constant, and every night infiltrators came. November 14th, 2 Marines killed in their fighting holes, throats cut, weapons stolen. November 15th, 3 more. A machine gun position overrun, crew dead before they could fire a shot. November 16th, 4 killed. Mortar team eliminated. The Japanese melted back into jungle before dawn. Lieutenant Haynes was 24 years old, had trained for this, believed in doctrine, in the Marine Corps way, but doctrine was getting his men killed. November 17th, 0600 hours. Haynes found Elijah cleaning his rifle. You still have that bow, Crow? Yes, sir. And you're confident you can use it effectively in combat conditions? Yes, sir. Haynes was quiet for a long moment. One night, you eliminate 0 threats, the bow stays in your gear permanently. Understood. Understood, sir. And Crow, first friendly casualty from your arrows, I will court-martial you myself. Clear. Clear, sir. That night would change everything. Elijah Crow positioned himself 80 yards forward of the Marine perimeter, alone, in darkness, with a bow that had fed his family during the Depression. He thought about his siblings, about the 6% miss rate, about 7 years of hunting where missing meant hunger. He thought about Lieutenant Haynes, about Gunny Pritchard, about the 9 Marines who died in 4 nights. Then he stopped thinking altogether. The bow wasn't about thinking. It was about muscle memory, about 10,000 shots, about survival. The Japanese came at 22:30 hours. 4 soldiers, moving confidently. Veterans who'd survived China, who understood jungle warfare, who'd learned to counter every American tactic. The lead soldier stopped, lit a cigarette. Elijah drew, held, released. The arrow took the soldier in the throat. He dropped without sound. The cigarette fell, smoldered. 3 soldiers remaining, crouching, scanning, listening for rifle fire, hearing nothing. Second arrow, chest shot, punctured lung, silent death. 3rd soldier panicked, fired his rifle wildly into the darkness, hitting nothing, alerting no one, too far from Marine lines to matter. 3rd arrow, abdomen. The soldier crawled 10 feet, died slowly. 4th soldier ran. Elijah tracked him in moonlight. 60 yards, 70. Drew, released. The arrow struck low back. The soldier collapsed mid-stride. Elijah waited 20 minutes, motionless, silent, making certain no other patrols approached. Then he moved forward, recovered 3 arrows. 1 shaft was broken. No matter, he had 23 left. He examined the first victim, maybe 20 years old, the cigarette still smoldering beside his body, a young face, someone's son. Elijah thought about Old Man Hatch, about respect for what you kill. You're not rabbits, he whispered to the darkness. You're men, but this is war. He returned to position, 0245 hours. 5 more Japanese soldiers approached from a different angle. Elijah waited, let them close to 40 yards, shot the straggler first, then the lead scout. The remaining 3 froze, confused, disoriented. 2 more arrows in 6 seconds, the last one ran. Elijah let him go, let him carry the story back, let him tell his commanders about death that came without sound, without warning, without explanation. 8 killed, 1 escaped. Dawn broke gray and wet. Elijah returned to Marine lines, reported to Lieutenant Haynes. 8 confirmed dead, sir. 1 got away. Bow worked silent like Gunny said it would. Haynes stared at him. But in one night. Yes, sir. Any friendly casualties? No, sir. Any indication the enemy knows our positions? The one who escaped knows nothing except his patrol died. Don't know where I was. Don't know how many of us there are. Just knows his friends are dead. Haynes was quiet, processing. Everything he'd been taught said this shouldn't work. Medieval weapons had no place in modern warfare. But 8 enemy dead disagreed. Tonight, Haynes said slowly, same sector, different position. We'll see if this was luck or skill. Elijah almost smiled. Gunny Pritchard says, luck is what happens when skill meets opportunity. I got the skill. War gave me the opportunity. That night, Elijah killed 19 more. By November 21st, the number would reach 116. The bow that had fed his family during the Depression was now feeding something else entirely. War. November 18th, 1943. 21:30 hours. Elijah Crow moved through the jungle 200 yards south of his previous position. Never the same place twice. Old Man Hatch had taught him that. Deer learned where hunters waited, avoided those spots, went elsewhere. Men were smarter than deer, supposedly. This position offered different advantages. A fallen ironwood tree created natural cover. Sight lines stretched 70 yards in 3 directions. Escape routes behind. Always know your exits. Another lesson from Missouri. He settled in, waited. The jungle's night sounds wrapped around him. Insects, distant birds. The ever-present rustle of things moving through darkness. His hands checked the bowstring automatically. Tension perfect. 23 arrows remaining after last night. He'd carved 3 replacement shafts during the day. Crude but functional. The Japanese came at 22:45 hours. Not 4 this time. 7. They moved differently than the previous night's patrol. More cautious. Weapons at ready. Spacing better. Someone had briefed them, told them patrols were disappearing, made them nervous. Good. Nervous men made mistakes. Elijah waited until they passed his position. Let them walk by. Then shot the rear guard from behind. The arrow punched between shoulder blades. Severed spine. The soldier dropped face first into jungle loam. Dead before he understood what happened. The sound of his fall made the others turn. They saw their comrade down. Saw nothing else. No muzzle flash, no smoke, no indication of where death had come from. Second arrow, third arrow, fourth. 3 more dropped in 5 seconds. The remaining 3 soldiers panicked, fired rifles into the darkness. Wild, undisciplined, hitting nothing but trees and shadows. 5th arrow took one in the neck while he was shooting. The last 2 ran. Elijah tracked them. Drew, released. One dropped at 60 yards. The final soldier disappeared into jungle. Let him go. Let him tell the story. Let fear spread. 7 killed in under a minute. Elijah waited 30 minutes, recovered 5 arrows. 2 were damaged beyond use. He noted this carefully. Arrow expenditure mattered. He had a finite supply. 03:15 hours, another patrol, 6 men this time. The pattern repeated. Wait. Patience. Select targets. Shoot rear security first. Eliminate leadership next. Let panic do the rest. By dawn, 19 Japanese soldiers lay dead in the sector Elijah covered. 19 silent deaths. 19 men who would never report back. 19 families who would receive news their sons died in the Solomon Islands, fighting an enemy they couldn't see or hear. Elijah felt nothing about this, couldn't afford to. Feeling led to hesitation. Hesitation led to failure. Failure led to dead Marines. The mathematics were clear. November 19th, night 3. Elijah climbed, 35 feet up a banyan tree. A massive thing roots thick as a man's waist branches, spreading like a cathedral. From this height, he could see further. Shoot at angles that made tracking his position nearly impossible. The bow's range from elevation increased. Physics, gravity assisted rather than fought. An arrow shot downward from 35 feet traveled faster. Hit harder, penetrated deeper. Old Man Hatch had never taught him this. Hatch shot from ground level. But principles remained. Understand your weapon. Understand your environment. Adapt. This night, 24 Japanese died. Not because they were careless, not because they were poorly trained, they were veterans, survivors, men who'd fought in China, who understood warfare. They died because they expected rifles, expected machine guns, expected grenades and mortars and all the conventional weapons of modern war. They didn't expect arrows fired from trees in absolute silence. One group of 5 walked directly beneath Elijah's position, never looked up. Why would they? American snipers shot from concealment, from distance, not from directly overhead. 5 arrows, 7 seconds, 5 dead. The number was becoming impossible to ignore. The enemy responds. Major Kenji Nakamura stood over the bodies. 51 corpses, 3 nights, all in the same sector, all killed the same way. Arrows, actual arrows, like something from the Kamakura period, like weapons his grandfather's grandfather might have faced. The medical officer's report lay on the makeshift table. Nakamura read it twice, tried to make it make sense. Penetration depth indicates minimum 65-pound draw weight. Arrow placement suggests single shooter. High degree of accuracy. Estimated range 40 to 70 meters. Multiple wounds on several victims indicate rapid follow-up shots. Nakamura was 43 years old, had commanded troops in Manchuria, understood modern warfare, understood American tactics. Machine guns, artillery, air support. This made no sense. Perhaps a trick, his intelligence officer suggested. Americans using arrows to confuse us, make us waste resources investigating. 51 bodies are not a trick, Nakamura replied. 51 families will receive news their sons are dead. That is not confusion. That is effectiveness. He ordered research, ancient texts, Kyoto principles, English longbow tactics from medieval warfare, anything that might provide insight. The conclusions were disturbing. A skilled archer could shoot 12 to 15 arrows per minute, could maintain accuracy at ranges exceeding 80 meters, created no sound, no muzzle flash, gave away no position. Countermeasures, Nakamura asked. His staff had few answers. Spread formations, increased spacing, better overhead security, all of which abandoned the infiltration tactics that had proven effective, all of which reduced their operational capability to counter a single American with a bow. The mathematics were unacceptable. November 20th, Nakamura issued new orders. Infiltration suspended in the sector where the archer operated. Units would avoid that area entirely. One American with a medieval weapon had shut down Japanese operations across 2 square kilometers. Among the soldiers, rumors spread. Ghost archer, American demon, spirit warrior. Nakamura didn't stop these rumors. Let his men believe. Fear was useful if properly directed. Fear kept soldiers cautious, alert. But this fear made them refuse missions. Made veterans who'd survived China decline to patrol certain areas. That was a problem. We must eliminate this archer, Nakamura told his staff. Target him specifically. Sir, we don't know where he is. He never shoots from the same position twice. Patrols that might locate him never return. Nakamura nodded slowly. He understood. Had understood from the beginning. They were not hunting the archer. The archer was hunting them. Battalion Review, November 20th, 0800 hours. Battalion Headquarters. Colonel Hendricks sat behind a field desk covered with reports, combat summaries, casualty figures, intelligence assessments, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of Japanese soldiers with arrows through their bodies. Lieutenant Haynes stood at attention. Gunny Pritchard beside him. Elijah Crow in the rear, still muddy from the previous night's work. Private First Class Crow, Hendricks said. You have killed 51 enemy soldiers in 3 nights using a hunting bow. Yes, sir. 0 friendly casualties from your operations. Yes, sir. 0 ammunition resupply required. Sir, I've expended 18 arrows, recovered 12, net loss 6. I can carve replacement shafts from local wood if needed. Hendricks looked up, studied Elijah with the expression of a man trying to solve an equation that refused to balance. The Japanese have ceased infiltration operations in your sector. Entirely. 2 square kilometers they now avoid. Because of you and that bow. Sir, I can't confirm why they avoid it. I can only confirm I've been effective when they don't. Hendricks almost smiled. Son, I fought in the First War, below wood. I have seen many things, but I have never seen one Marine with a medieval weapon shut down enemy operations across an area this size. He stood, walked to the map board, pointed. We have 40 miles of perimeter. We cannot put you everywhere, but where we put you, the enemy does not go. That is force multiplication. That is combat effectiveness. He turned back. It is also completely irregular, violates multiple regulations, uses non-standard equipment, sets dangerous precedent. The tent was silent. However, Hendricks continued, Marine Corps doctrine states we adapt tactics to circumstances. Circumstances here are Japanese infiltration. Your bow counters are fahio that infiltration effectively. Therefore, you are authorized to continue operations. Yes, sir. With conditions. First, any friendly casualty from your arrows, you face immediate court-martial. Second, you will brief intelligence on your methods so we can develop doctrine. Third, you are promoted to corporal effective immediately. Sir, you don't get a choice, Corporal. You're now directly responsible for this irregular warfare asset, which is yourself. Dismissed. Outside the tent, Pritchard clapped Elijah on the shoulder. You just changed Marine Corps doctrine, Crow. Didn't set out to change anything, Gunny, just doing what works. That's exactly how doctrine changes. November 21st, night 5. Elijah positioned in a different tree, a different sector, 48 feet up this time, the highest he'd climbed yet. The Japanese came in force, 35 men, a full platoon, reconnaissance in force, attempting to probe Marine positions, identify weak points, report back. They would never report anything. Elijah waited until they were directly below, strung out in patrol formation. Bunched too close for jungle movement, clearly nervous, clearly expecting trouble, just not from above. He shot the rear security first. 2 men, 2 arrows, 3 seconds apart. The patrol halted, confused, rear guards down, no sound, no indication of threat. Point element next. 2 more. Now the patrol was trapped. Couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. Leaders dead, fear spreading. Elijah worked systematically, methodically. The way he'd worked deer herds in Missouri, cull the edges, drive the remainder into kill zones. 42 minutes, 28 killed, 7 wounded fleeing. The tree position made recovery difficult. He descended carefully, retrieved what arrows he could, 15 recovered, 11 lost or damaged beyond repair. He'd need to carve more tomorrow. But tonight's work was done. 116 Japanese soldiers, 5 days. The number that would define him for the rest of his life. Officer hunting. December. The war changed in December. Large unit engagements replaced infiltration. Set-piece battles, artillery duels, frontal assaults. The bow's effectiveness should have diminished. It didn't. Elijah found new applications. December 11th, 1943, 0630 hours. Japanese staging area 180 yards from Marine forward positions. An assembly area, where units gathered before assaults, where officers briefed soldiers, where NCOs organized equipment. Visible from an ironwood tree 100 yards behind Marine lines. Elijah climbed at 0400 hours. Before dawn, before Japanese lookouts could spot movement, settled into position 50 feet up, waited for sunrise. By 700 hours, the staging area was active. 200 Japanese soldiers, preparing for assault, officers moving among them, identifiable by uniform differences, by the way enlisted men responded, by their positions and movements. Elijah counted 18 officers and senior NCOs. He began shooting at 0715 hours. The first officer dropped without warning, arrow through the upper chest, dead before hitting ground. Chaos rippled through the formation. Men looking for snipers, for rifle positions, scanning tree lines at their level, not looking up into trees 100 yards behind enemy lines. Second officer, third, fourth. Each time panic increased. Officers shouted orders, tried to organize, became targets by standing, by being visible, by leading. By 0753 hours, 18 Japanese officers and NCOs lay dead in that staging area. At 0800 hours, Marines assaulted. The Japanese formation collapsed. Leaderless, disorganized. Resistance crumbled in 14 minutes. Estimated Marine casualties from the assault 40% lower than expected, because leaders were already dead when the shooting started. Elijah's innovation wasn't new. Frederick the Great had said it. Napoleon had practiced it. Lee had understood it. Eliminate leadership formations collapse. The bow made it possible to eliminate leadership without counter-sniper fire. No rifle report to track, no muzzle flash to target, just silent death from impossible angles. He repeated the tactic December 13th, December 17th, December 22nd. Each time, Marines assaulted formations already shattered by leadership losses. The Japanese began keeping officers further back, away from front positions, hidden, which reduced their tactical effectiveness, which was its own kind of victory. The wounding December 15, 1943, 15:20 hours. Elijah was descending from a tree. Mission complete. 11 enemy eliminated. Time to withdraw before Japanese realized where he'd shot from. The mortar round hit 20 yards away. Airburst, Japanese 81 millimeter. Time to explode above ground, scattering shrapnel in a cone beneath. Elijah was 10 feet up when the world turned orange and loud. Shrapnel hit like fists, right thigh, left forearm, minor chest wounds. He lost grip, fell, hit branches on the way down, landed hard. Pain arrived seconds later, sharp, immediate, overwhelming. He tried to stand, couldn't. Right leg wouldn't support weight. Looked down, saw blood. Too much blood. The tree he'd chosen was ironwood. 4-inch bark, dense, hard. The shrapnel had hit the far side first. Tree absorbed most of the blast, saved his life. Luck, no. He'd chosen that tree deliberately. Positioned himself so the trunk was between him and likely Japanese mortar positions. Skill. But skill didn't stop the bleeding. He crawled 170 yards, through jungle, toward marine lines, every movement agony, the bow still strapped across his back, arrows scattered during the fall. Took 5.5 hours, reached marine lines at 20:50 hours. Sentry challenged. Elijah croaked the password. Collapsed. Medics worked fast. Tourniquets. Sulfa powder. Morphine. You're lucky, the corpsman said, stitching. Shrapnel 2 inches left hits femoral artery. You bleed out in this jungle. Not luck, Elijah managed through morphine fog. Picked thick tree, between me and their mortars. The corpsman paused. You mean you calculated blast angles before climbing? 7 years hunting, you learn to think about cover, where threats come from, trees that stop bullets, or shrapnel. 2 weeks recovery, minor wounds, would heal. But it was the first time since he began combat operations that Elijah had been touched. The numbers mattered at that moment. 183 eliminated so far. 1 wounded. The ratio was impossible, unsustainable. Every veteran knew it. Eventually, odds caught up with everyone. Elijah had just been reminded he wasn't immortal. December 28th, cleared for light duty. The wounds healing, still hurt, would hurt for months. He requested return to active operations. Denied. Corporal Crow, Lieutenant Haynes said, "You've eliminated more enemy personnel than any Marine in this battalion. You've done enough." "Sir, I can still shoot." "You can barely walk." "Don't need to walk to shoot from a tree." Haynes stared at him. "Why, you've proven your point. Changed doctrine, saved lives. Why keep going?" Elijah thought about Missouri, about siblings watching him return from hunts, about the 6% miss rate, about doing what needed doing. "Because the job's not finished, sir." Haynes approved 3 more missions before Bougainville operations concluded. 15 more enemy eliminated. Total for Bougainville, the 198 confirmed. The bow that fed his family during the Depression had killed 198 enemy soldiers. The mathematics were clear. The price was only beginning. January 14th, 1944. Battalion formation. The morning sun cut through jungle canopy in shafts of dusty light. 200 Marines stood at attention. Salt-stained uniforms, muddy boots, faces aged beyond their years. Colonel Hendricks read from a paper that seemed too clean for this place. For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. Corporal Elijah Crow, on numerous occasions between November 17th and December 28, 1943, did voluntarily position himself forward of friendly lines to engage and eliminate hostile forces employing unconventional methods. His actions resulted in the confirmed elimination of 198 enemy soldiers with 0 friendly casualties. His tactical innovations disrupted enemy operations across significant operational areas. His courage and dedication reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Marine Corps. Hendricks pinned the bronze star on Elijah's chest. The metal felt heavy, heavier than it should. 198 confirmed on Bougainville. Each one a number, each number a face, each face someone's son. The citation didn't mention the bow, called it unconventional methods. The Marine Corps was already sanitizing the story, making it fit regulations retroactively. After the ceremony, Pritchard found him. "They're writing Doctrine, Crow. You know that, Sir, Marine Corps Operations Order 44-12. Silent weapons may be authorized where tactical situation warrants. That's because you proved it works. Elijah looked at the medal and just did what needed doing, Gunny. That's how history gets made. Someone does what needs doing. Everyone else writes it down later. February 1944. The division rotated off Bougainville. Rest, refit, preparation for the next island. Staff personnel compiled statistics, numbers, data, everything militaries love to quantify. Bougainville campaign. Corporal Elijah Crow. Final assessment. 198 confirmed enemy killed. 0 friendly casualties from his operations. Arrow expenditure, 148 arrows shot. 92 recovered. Net loss, 56 arrows. Recovery rate, 64%. Tactical impact. Japanese infiltration reduced 73% in sectors where Crow operated. Estimated Marine lives saved through reduced infiltration casualties, 47. The numbers told a story. Silent weapons worked, in specific circumstances, with specific skills. Skills that couldn't be taught quickly. The Marine Corps authorized a trial program. 20 volunteers. Intensive archery training. Results were mixed. Most achieved basic proficiency, could hit stationary targets at 40 yards. Some managed moving targets. None approached Elijah's ability. The conclusion was clear. Archery required lifetime development, not viable for standard infantry training. But principles were incorporated. Fieldcraft, silent movement, attacking from unexpected angles, understanding that sometimes the best weapon was the one the enemy didn't expect. Doctrine changed, quietly, the way important things often do. Guam and Tinian, the war continues. July 1944, Guam, different island, same jungle, same enemy, same tactics. Elijah went ashore on the third day, after the beachhead was secured, after heavy fighting had pushed Japanese forces inland. His role had evolved, no longer infiltration counter, now a specialist, deployed for specific missions, high-value targets. Positions where conventional weapons created problems. Guam was 20 days of combat, dense jungle, caves, prepared positions. Elijah adapted, shot from trees, from ridgelines, from positions that gave elevation and concealment. The bow's silence remained its greatest advantage. No counter-sniper fire, no mortar bracketing, just quiet death from impossible angles. 47 confirmed on Guam. Each one deliberate, calculated, necessary. He stopped seeing faces somewhere around number 200, started seeing targets instead. It was easier that way. Necessary for function. The human mind could only carry so much. Late July, Tinian, smaller island, more open terrain, less jungle. The bow's effectiveness should have diminished. It didn't. Urban combat, fighting through buildings, villages, Japanese positions and structures. Elijah found new applications, shot through windows, through doorways. Arrows didn't ricochet like bullets, didn't penetrate walls and kill civilians on the other side. Precision without collateral damage. 33 confirmed on Tinian. By August 1944, the total stood at 278. 278 confirmed enemy killed. 0 friendly casualties from his operations. Success rate above 98%. The numbers were impossible. Unprecedented. Would never be matched. Elijah Crow was 24 years old. Had killed more enemy soldiers with a bow than any man in modern history. Possibly any man in any history. The war would end before he turned 26. The price. August 1945. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. The fighting stopped. The killing stopped. The war ended. Elijah was at Camp Pendleton, training for the invasion of Japan that never happened. The bow in his locker, arrows wrapped carefully, waiting. When news came, men celebrated, cheered, drank, hugged strangers. Elijah walked to the beach, sat alone, watched waves. 278. The number wouldn't leave him. 278 men who would never go home, never see their families, never grow old. Because of him, because of a bow, because he'd been good at something that translated to killing. The first one came back clearest. The soldier with the cigarette, 20 years old, maybe younger. The cigarette falling, still lit, still burning when the man stopped. Elijah wondered about that soldier sometimes, what his name was, if he'd had siblings, if they were like Elijah's siblings, if they'd gone hungry during Japanese depression, if he'd learned to shoot to feed them. Probably. Men everywhere learned violence for similar reasons. November 1945. Discharge papers. Staff Sergeant E6. Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Presidential Unit Citation, Honorable Discharge, Return to civilian life. The bow went home with him. The arrows too, everything packed carefully in his duffel. He would never shoot them again. Homecoming. The silence begins December 1945. Hickory Bend, Missouri. The town looked exactly the same, as if war had happened somewhere else, to someone else, to people who weren't from Stone County. Elijah's father met him at the bus station. Older, grayer, sober for 3 years now. Welcome home, son. They shook hands, didn't hug, wasn't their way. The zinc mine rehired him. Same job, 35 cents an hour, same as 1941. 4 years of war and the pay hadn't changed. He went underground, dug zinc, came home dirty, washed, slept. The routine was comforting, predictable, safe. At night the faces came. Not every night, every 3 or 4 weeks, random, unpredictable. The 20-year-old with the cigarette mostly. Sometimes others, the officer on Guam, the teenage soldier on Tinian who'd look surprised when the arrow hit. Elijah would wake, sweating, heart racing, take hours to sleep again. He never mentioned the nightmares, not to his father, not to anyone. What would he say? That he saw the faces of men he'd killed, that sometimes he heard them, that sometimes he wondered if he'd done the right thing. The war was over. The killing was done. Talking wouldn't change anything. June 1946. He met Vera Ashford. She taught 3rd grade, had known Elijah before the war, remembered him as the quiet boy who hunted to feed his siblings. They married October 1946. Small ceremony, 20 guests, no mention of war, no uniform, just 2 people starting something new. Vera was kind, patient, didn't push when Elijah went quiet sometimes, didn't ask about the nightmares when he woke gasping. She knew he'd fought in the Pacific. That was enough. The bow stayed in the barn loft, wrapped in canvas, gathering dust. Elijah never touched it. Family, the next generation. March 1948, Silas Crow was born. 8 pounds, healthy, perfect. Elijah held his son and felt something shift. A weight he'd carried for 3 years lightened slightly. This was forward. This was future. This was something other than past. Silas grew, walked, talked, asked questions the way children do. Daddy, what did you do in the war? What needed doing? Did you shoot guns? Sometimes. Did you fight bad guys? I fought other soldiers. They weren't bad, just on the other side. Vera would intercept these conversations. Redirect. Give Silas something else to think about. She understood without being told. Some things stayed buried. 1966. The years passed. Silas grew into a thoughtful boy, quiet like his father, read constantly, did well in school. 1966, Silas graduated high school, accepted to teacher's college, would follow his mother into education. No military service. The draft existed. Vietnam raged. But Silas drew a high number. Never called. Elijah was grateful, more grateful than he'd ever admit. 1 war per family was enough. 1972. 1972. Silas was 24, teaching high school history, living in Springfield. Visited monthly. One evening, sitting on the porch, Silas asked, "Dad, you wake up sometimes at night. I heard you when I was growing up." The nightmares. They're about the war, aren't they? Elijah was quiet for a long time. Yes. You want to talk about it? No. Why not? Because I remember 278 faces. Every single one. Talking won't erase them. Silence at least keeps them quiet. Silas nodded, didn't push, understood that some doors stayed closed, but the number stayed with him. 278. What did that mean? The revelation, 1978, October 1978, 3rd Marine Division reunion, Camp Pendleton, California. Elijah hadn't attended previous reunions, didn't want to revisit, didn't want to remember. But Pritchard had written, said it might be the last one. They were all getting old, dying. This might be the final chance. So Elijah went, brought Silas, now 30, principal of a middle school, married, expecting his first child. The reunion was smaller than expected. 40 men. Once they'd been thousands, now just 40 remained. Old men, gray, bent, carrying weight invisible to outsiders. They recognized Elijah, some immediately, others after a moment. Longbow Crow, the bow marine, the archer. Pritchard embraced him, 73 years old, retired 20 years, living in Arizona. Thought you'd never come, Crow. Almost didn't. Glad you did. That evening, younger Marines asked questions. Men in their 30s, too young for World War II, Vietnam veterans. Some had heard rumors. Is it true you killed over 100 Japanese with a bow? Pritchard answered. 116 in 5 days. 198 total on Bougainville. 278 across the campaign. The room went quiet. That's impossible, someone said. A bow against rifles. I was there, Pritchard replied. Saw the bodies, saw the arrows. Crow was a ghost in that jungle. Japanese couldn't counter him. Couldn't find him. Couldn't stop him. He pulled out photographs, combat photos, declassified years ago. Japanese soldiers with arrows through them. Elijah in a tree with his bow. After-action reports. Silas saw them for the first time. Saw his father, 24 years old. Lean, hard, holding a weapon that looked medieval. Saw the caption. Corporal Elijah Crow, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines, Bougainville, 1943. Unconventional weapons specialist. 278 confirmed enemy, K1A. 278. The number from the porch conversation. The number from the nightmares. That night, hotel room, Silas confronted his father. 278 people, Dad. 278. Yes. Why didn't you ever tell me? Elijah sat on the bed, looked at his hands. The same hands that had drawn a bow 278 times. The same hands that had recovered arrows from bodies. What would I tell you that I killed 278 men, that some deserved it, that some were teenagers following orders, same as I was, that I still don't know how to feel about it, so I don't talk about it. But you carry it. Every day. The nightmares. Every few weeks for 33 years. Silas was quiet. You see them in the nightmares. Most of them. The first one clearest. 20 years old, lighting a cigarette. I shot him through the throat. He died before the cigarette hit the ground. Jesus, Dad. I don't want sympathy, don't want understanding. Just want to carry it quiet and not burden anyone else. That's not how family works. It's how I work. They sat in silence, father and son, the weight of 278 lives between them. The end. February 1991. Elijah Crow died February 18, 1991. Age 71. Emphysema, miner's lung. 30 years underground breathing, zinc dust caught up. The funeral was small. 50 people. Family. Old neighbors. 6 Marines, all in their 70s. All knowing why they came. Pritchard gave the eulogy. 86 years old. Voice still strong. Eli Crow did what needed doing without seeking glory. Carried burden without complaint. Lived quiet after loud war. That's what heroes do. Not the ones who talk about it. The ones who do it and go home and never mention it again. He killed 278 enemy soldiers, saved estimated 47 American lives, changed Marine Corps doctrine, did it with a weapon most people thought belonged in museums. But more than that, he came home, worked the mine, raised a son, was a good husband, a quiet man, carried weight none of us saw until he led us. The world didn't know his name. He wanted it that way. Noise wasn't his way. Quiet was. The gravestone was simple. Elijah Crow, Staff Sergeant USMC, 1919 to 1991. Semper Fidelis. No mention of kills, no mention of the bow, per his written request. Found in his papers after death. Put the dates, put the corps, nothing else. Let the numbers die with me. But the numbers didn't die. Legacy March 1991. Vera donated the bow to the Marine Corps Museum at Quantico. 68-pound longbow, hickory and yew, 46 years old. Never fired after 1945. The placard read, Hunting Longbow. Combat used Bougainville, Guam Tinian, 1943 to 1944. Staff Sergeant Elijah Crow. 278 confirmed enemy killed. 0 friendly casualties. The museum curator placed it carefully, behind glass, preserved. Visitors walked past mostly, glanced, moved on to more impressive weapons. Tanks, artillery, fighter planes. Few stopped to read, fewer understood. A bow, in a war of rifles and bombs. 278 confirmed. Impossible. But there it was. June 1991. Missouri dedicated a highway sign. State Highway 413, mile marker 42. Small, green, easy to miss. Hickory Bend, home of Staff Sergeant Elijah Crow, USMC, 1941 to 1945. No mention of kills, no mention of the bow, Just acknowledgement he'd existed. Served. Come home. Silas drove past it once, stopped, stood beside it, his son in the car, 8 years old, asking questions. Who was great-grandpa Eli? A quiet man who did necessary things when called, then came home and stayed quiet. Noise wasn't his way. What did he do? Silas thought about the photographs, the reports, the number, 278. He protected people, the way good men do, without talking about it. The boy accepted this. Children do. Years later, he'd learn more. But for now, that was enough. Closing Marine Corps Museum, Quantico, Virginia, present day. A visitor stops at the bow display, reads the placard. 278 kills with a bow, that's incredible. The veteran tour guide nods. 78 years old, Vietnam, 3 tours, knows the stories. Most incredible part, almost nobody knows his name. He wanted it that way. Why? The guide looks at the bow. Old wood, simple construction, built to feed a family during the Depression, used to win a war. Because he understood something most people don't. Being remembered isn't the point. Doing what needs doing is the point. Going home after is the point. Living quiet with what you've done is the point. He carried 278 faces for 46 years, never talked about it, never sought recognition, just worked his mind, raised his son, woke up every few weeks seeing those faces. That's the real story, not the kills, the carrying, the silence, the weight. The visitor nods, doesn't fully understand, can't, hasn't carried that weight. The guide does understand, has his own faces, his own numbers, his own silence. They stand together, looking at a bow behind glass, a weapon that shouldn't have worked. That did anyway. Because the man holding it had spent 7 years learning that missing meant hunger, and war was just another kind of hunger. Elijah Crow returned to Missouri, returned to the mine, returned to quiet. The bow stayed silent for 46 years. Now it rests behind glass, a reminder that sometimes the old ways still work, that sometimes the quiet warriors are the most dangerous, that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones nobody knows. 278 confirmed, 0 friendly casualties. 1 quiet man, 1 impossible story, all true. The bow that fed his family during the Depression killed 278 enemy soldiers in World War II, then went silent. Forever. Just like the man who drew it. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. To the mission, to the core, to the silence that came after. Elijah Crow, 1919 to 1991. Staff Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. The archer nobody remembers. The way he wanted it.